In the 60s, East Side High School was one of the top-performing schools in Paterson, New Jersey, and their favorite teacher Joe was loved for his compassion. One day, Joe's fellow teacher Frank interrupts his class and informs that the union executive board was holding a meeting without them. Joe immediately storms into the meeting and yells at the others for not supporting his reform ideas. However, the board dislikes Joe and transfers him to another school. 20 years without this man, and East Side High is always on the news as the hotbed of violence. The school building had lost its luster, the students no longer behave, while bullying and violence echo in every hallway. The teachers are intimidated, taken for granted and occasionally get beaten by students if they intervene. Drugs and weapons are being traded like candy. Most students can't even pass the basic skills test. This situation raises concern for Mayor Bodman, because losing the school to state control will cost him his election. The school superintendent Frank and Mr. Rosenberg, the school board attorney, agree on bringing Joe back to handle the situation. However, Bodman dislikes the idea, but eventually agrees, having no other choice. Frank visits Joe with Rosenberg, offering him the principal position at East Side. But Joe rejects, accusing the mayor of caring only about his election and not the kids. However, he changes his mind when Frank tells him he can't die with dignity, knowing he couldn't do anything for the school he once loved. The next day, Joe arrives at East Side as the new principal. During a staff meeting, he makes it clear to everyone that he will set new rules and the rest are to follow them. He starts with a list of all students involved in criminal activities and orders the janitor to clean the walls while taking students in detention for help. The English teacher Mr. Darnell gets demoted to assistant football coach. Joe further announces that security guards would patrol the hallways to curb violence, and teachers need to focus on getting students ready for the upcoming standardized test, where they needed a 75% pass rate compared to the previous test less than 40%. In a school assembly, the bullies are shouting on the stage when Joe suddenly bumps into Kanisha, a former elementary student of his, who is thrilled to see him again. Joe asks for silence, but no one listens. As the bullies laugh when asked to sing the school song, Joe instantly expels them, assuring the rest of the students that they wouldn't be bothered anymore. Security escorts the expelled bullies off the stage, which help calm the other students. Joe also warns the remaining students that they could be next if they don't focus on their studies. Later that afternoon, Joe meets with the parents, many of whom, including a furious mother named Liana, are upset about the expulsions. But Joe doesn't back down and gives a speech about removing a few bad apples to save the rest. 300 bullies are expelled to save 2,700 students. As Joe reminds them of his promise to God to save the school, most parents find it inspiring, but Liana remains angry. The next day, Joe encounters one of the expelled students. As Sam claims his expulsion was a mistake, Joe takes him to the school roof and calls Sam a coward for not telling his parents about the expulsion. He further warns him that drugs would lead to his death, telling him to jump off the roof if he wants to die so badly. Sam promises to change his behavior. So Joe gives him a second chance, but with a stern warning that there will be no third chances. During lunch, Joe walks around the cafeteria, listening to the students and giving advice. He is pleased to see that Ray is wearing a suit, which sets a great example for others, unlike Sam and his friends who dress sloppily. Joe calls them out in front of everyone when he sees them harassing a girl and asks them to stand up. He mocks them for their clothing before ordering them to sing the school song, warning the whole room that no one should move during the song, but Mr. Darnell has sent him to his office for insubordination. Sam and his friends don't know the lyrics to the school song, so Joe punishes them with detention. He also warns that everyone should be prepared to sing the song on command or face consequences. Afterward, Joe meets with the music teacher Elliot to inquire about the progress on the song. But Elliot insists on rehearsing them for the upcoming choir concert in New York. The students practice Mozart and Elliot wants Joe to respect their hard work. She blatantly states that she doesn't like being questioned by him. Joe immediately fires her and cancels the concert so the students could focus on their upcoming test. Mrs. Powers, the pianist, is now in charge of the music class. Later, during a meeting with Darnell, Joe was called out again. In a fit of anger, Darnell keeps humiliating Joe in Joe's office. As their argument escalates, Darnell also ends up being suspended. Vice Principal Joan tries to reason with Joe, explaining that Darnell was more than just a coach and that no one understands Joe's methods, but Joe isn't willing to change his mind. On the day of the practice test, the students work hard, and the teachers closely monitor them. Joe doesn't want to wait long for the results, so he sends Joan to the school board to get the scores immediately. During a special presentation to the local press, a fight broke out in the cafeteria. One of the expelled students returns and attacks Ray, even pulling out a knife. Joe quickly intervenes, wondering how the boy had gotten inside. Security informs him that someone must have let him in from the inside. In response, Joe decides to have all the school doors locked and chained. Sometime later, Joe finds Kanisha feeling down. She is a bright student, but her grades have dropped since she became homeless after her mother abandoned her, so Joe takes Joan to visit Kanisha's mother at her home. The mother explains that she had Kenesha as a teenager and had to sacrifice her normal life to provide for Kenesha, and now she is in a difficult emotional state after letting her go. She thought Kenesha would be better off in child services, but she still loves her and wants her back. Joe promises to help Kenesha's mother find a better job and living conditions if she takes her daughter back and helps her focus on her education. The news of the chained doors sends waves in the media, while Liana seizes the opportunity to file a complaint with the school board. Frank scolds Joe for his reckless behavior, warning him that Liana is organizing a campaign to have him removed with the fire chief on her side. Frank reminds Joe he was alienating everyone, just as he had with his ex-wife, and advises him to write an apology letter to Elliot and Darnell. Soon Darnell gets reinstated, but the relief is short-lived. Trouble brews as the fire chief storms into the school. Joe takes a bat and forces him out. Joan attempts to voice her concerns about Joe's attitude, but as always, her words fall on deaf ears. Joe's heart breaks when the next time he sees Ray, it's only to say goodbye as he has to leave the school for good. Later, Joe discovers Sam and his friends messing around in the bathroom. He has them sing the school song and is taken aback by their beautiful rendition, performed like a church choir. The boys reveal that it was Powers who taught them this version. Impressed, Joe seeks her out to offer his congratulations and asks if she would teach the entire school to sing it this way. When the practice test results come in, Joe's heart sinks to see a mere 33% score. He assembles all the teachers and blames their inefficiency for the disappointing results. Joe then proposes a new tutoring program and a remedial reading course on Saturdays to boost their performance. But a teacher argues that most kids will skip classes on weekend. So Joe will visit each student's home, engage their parents, and even invite them to join if they struggle with reading. Over the next few weeks, teachers and students work diligently, with Joe fully involved in supporting his students. But this effort falls short for Liana. Alongside the fire chief, she confronts Bodman directly. Despite Frank and Rosenberg's attempts to defend Joe, Bodman dismisses them and strikes a deal with Liana. Bodman agrees to fire Joe in exchange for her support in rallying the town for his campaign. Later in the bathroom, Bodman reveals to the fire chief that they plan to arrest Joe for the illegal changes after the test, unaware that Rosenberg overhears them from a stall. Rosenberg immediately informs Frank and warns Joe. He quickly devises a plan. When the security guards spot the chief arriving, they'll call code 10 on their walkie-talkies and the teachers will temporarily remove the chains. Later, Joan attempts to discuss the reading program's progress with Joe, but he brushes her off, claiming he's too busy and suggesting that his vice principal should handle things independently. Frustrated, Joan requests a transfer, expressing her exasperation with working alongside him. She also calls him an egomaniacal windbag who whips those who can't fight back and reveals that half the staff shares her frustration. They haven't left yet because they care about the kids, but Joan has reached her breaking point. The next day before the assembly, Joe hands Joan her transfer papers. Joe then delivers a powerful speech to the students, urging them to overcome the negative perceptions about their school and prove their worth. He expresses his gratitude to the teachers, giving special credit to Joan. Next, Powers sings "Lean on Me," and the students join in, united and eager to demonstrate their strength. Witnessing the school's unity, Joan decides to stay for the test. The students then take the test, but the school board meeting looms and Liana is growing impatient. Bodman finally authorizes the fire chief to obtain a court order. Meanwhile, Kenesha discovers she is pregnant and her boyfriend denies it, even though she insists he's the only boy she's been with. Joe offers his support and promises they'll find other solutions. Right then, a guard announces the arrival of the fire chief along with Liana and a swarm of reporters. Joe calls code 10 in a desperate attempt to remove the chains, but the chief is prepared with a recording of the code. So Joe is arrested for violating the fire code, leaving Joan to take over. That night, the school board convenes. Frank defends Joe's efforts, but Liana counters, highlighting the dismal 33% score on the practice test as evidence of Joe's failure. The meeting takes an unexpected turn when every student arrives, demanding Joe's release. Bodman doesn't risk his election by firing someone with such support. So he visits Joe, asking him to tell his students to leave, but Joe refuses. Bodman then warns him of armed police, ready to take on violence. Scared, Joe agrees to talk to them. He still prioritizes their safety, not because he thinks they're doing anything wrong. When Joe steps outside, he finds Liana being insulted by the students, who remind her of all Joe's contributions to the school. Joe is moved when the students call him a father but remains concerned about the police. He steps in to remind them to respect the law. His speech is cut short when Joan arrives with the test scores, saying that the school has passed. As celebrations erupt, Joe tells Bodman and the state to go to hell. Joe keeps his job, and the students end the night by singing the school song. At graduation, Joe hands out diplomas with heartfelt words for each student. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.